Number one, you want to get as many civilians out of Rafah as possible. I think that you want to try to clear that out. I know that with diplomacy, maybe you get them into Egypt. I know that that's been refused, but with the right diplomacy, I think it would be possible. As Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something in the Negev. I would try to move people in there so that you can go in and finish the job. Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions, if that would have gone into...
One thing I associate Jared Kushner with is creative deal-making, thinking outside the box. Do you have a proposal or an idea or a sketch for how we end this crisis?
Sure. So I think that the dilemma that Israeli leadership has right now is, do you do a short-term deal that leaves you more vulnerable in the future, or do you take this current situation and try to figure out a way where you can create a paradigm where your citizens will be safe and this will not happen again? So it's a very, very tough dilemma to be faced with if you are the leader of a country. So what I would do right now if I was Israel is I would try to say, number one, you want to get as many civilians out of Rafah as possible. I think that you want to try to clear that out. I know that with diplomacy, maybe you get them into Egypt. I know that that's been refused, but with the right diplomacy, I think it would be possible. But in addition to that, the thing that I would try to do if I was Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something in the Negev. I would try to move people in there. I know that won't be the popular thing to do, but I think that that's a better option to do so that you can go in and finish the job. I think there was one decision point they had. Do we go into Gaza? Do we not go into Gaza? They had the hostages. There really was, I think, no choice but to do that. I think that they were smart to go slowly and deliberately. Gaza's booby-trapped like crazy. They have over 400 miles of underground tunnels. And so I think that they've taken some of the right steps in order to go there. But you have to, again, I think Israel's gone way more out of their way than a lot of other countries would to try to protect civilians from casualties. But I do think right now opening up the Negev, creating a secure area there, moving the civilians out, and then going in and finishing the job would be the right move.
Is that something that they're talking about in Israel? I mean, that's the first I've really heard of somebody, aside from President Sisi, suggesting that that the Gazans who are trying to flee the fighting could take refuge in the Negev. Are people in Israel seriously talking about that possibility, about hosting Gazan refugees in what is considered, quote unquote, Israel proper?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but that would be something you would try to work on.
I'm sitting in Miami Beach right now, and I'm looking at this situation, and I'm just thinking, what would I do if I was there? And again, you look at, I mean, with Israel, it's a different thing, right? In Syria, when there's refugees, Turkey took them, Europe took them, Jordan took them. For whatever reason, here in Gaza, there's refugees from the fighting, from an offensive attack that was staged from Gaza. Israel's going in to do, a long-term deterrence mission. And it's unfortunate that nobody's taking the refugees.
You saw Tom Friedman's column on Tuesday about where he put forward a plan to get out of this, and it's called "Only MBS and Biden Can Redirect the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict." And he says Biden should recognize the Palestinian Authority unilaterally as a state, and MBS should go to Jerusalem like Egyptian President Anwar Sadat did in 1977, and he should say, "I'll normalize with Israel, I'll recognize West Jerusalem as your capital, and I'll even pay to rebuild Gaza if you recognize a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital." What do you think? Good idea?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that there's certain elements of it that are correct. I think proactively recognizing a Palestinian state would essentially be rewarding an act of terror that was perpetrated into Israel. So it's a super bad idea in that regard. The way that we did it was like a little bit inverted from there, right? So when we were working on the Palestinian issue, which we spent a lot of time on, and up until October 7th, the Biden administration really did not burn a lot of calories on it. They basically said this is a lost effort. We shouldn't spend time on it. But we spent a lot of time developing a plan. And you can go online, Google Peace to Prosperity. You'll find the plan that we put out in the White House, about 180 pages, very detailed. We started out, I met with the Palestinian negotiators, the Israeli negotiators, and I asked them, basically a form of simple questions. First, identify, like, what are these people actually fighting over for 70 years, right? And it came down to a list of like 11 issues, of which there were only really 3 of them, right? One was kind of the land barrier. And I kind of looked at it and I said, well, any outcome is kind of arbitrary, right? 'Cause it's a compromise between 2 positions. You have the religious sites where they threw in a lot of issues like, sovereignty. Does sovereignty belong to God? Does it belong to this? You have basically 2 sites, one under the other, that both religions think is very critical to them. But I said, well, what do we really want if we, get all the technical people out of the room? What we want is people to have the ability to pray freely. The third issue that I thought was critical was really just security, right? And you think about it, we think about it with different countries, but imagine you're like the governor of New Jersey, and then there's people in Pennsylvania who are trying to kind of cross the border and kill your people. You have to make a deal where you're making it less likely they're going to be able to harm your people than more. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to win an election, and it's not a prudent thing to do. The second thing we put together was an economic plan, because as I was progressing down that road, I said, okay, let's say miraculously I get people to agree on borders. Let's say I get them to agree on a security regime, and let's say I get them to agree that we could all, pray properly and respect each other. Then what happens the next day, right? A lot of the region, a lot of what Israel's been used for has been a scapegoat, I believe, from leaders in the region to basically deflect from their own shortcomings at home. So I felt like, most human beings want the ability to live a better life. And if we can create an economic plan that would basically allow people to live a better life, then maybe that would give them an ability to actually start focusing on the future, how to make their kids' lives better, instead of focusing on how do we solve problems from the past. So that was really what we put together, and that was really a framework for how we thought we could make progress. So for a Palestinian state, when we looked at it, you say, what are the prerequisites that people need to live a better life? Number one is you need a functioning judiciary, you need a business climate, you need property rights, you need reasons for people to invest capital in order to give people an opportunity to grow. And so those conditions really don't exist. And so the Palestinian leadership really has not passed any of the tests over the last 30 years in order to, I think, qualify for it. Now, I do think the notion of a Palestinian state that doesn't have the ability to harm Israel from a security perspective is a worthy objective. But I think you need to figure out how do you make them earn it, and at least have a viable pathway towards creating the institutions that can make it thrive and viable.